Hello and welcome to CNC World, broadcasting from North America and around the globe. I'm Xie He in Washington. Today in our studio we have Mr. Ron Elmond, partner at the Wix Group. Welcome to our program, Mr. Elmond.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. The Shanghai Cooperation Organization, or SCO Summit, has just concluded on Sunday in East China's port city of Qingdao. The meeting yields fruitful outcomes. Documents were signed and leaders of the SCO member states have reached broad consensus on major international and regional issues. So, sir, how would you comment on the role that the SCO Summit played in bringing the member states closer to cooperation?
Well, that's a very good question. I think we have to start at the very beginning of the road of the SCO. This organization has grown in depth and scope over the last 2 decades, and even before that. If we think about initially when the organization began in 1996 with the Shanghai, leading to the Shanghai 5 in 2001, but even prior to that was to help resolve border disputes after the collapse of the Soviet Union, and China and Russia working with Kyrgyzstan, Kazakhstan, and Tajikistan helped resolve some key critical border disputes, which led to even further areas of cooperation. We saw Uzbekistan join in 2001, and then most recently, now to include India and Pakistan. So we've gone from a regional organization really to an international organization, and the Shanghai spirit has grown in depth and scope to include large parts of Asia. So I think it's very important to remember how much this organization has grown over the years, and now 17 years later, it's really become one of the important international organizations we have in global governance.
Yeah, and you have just mentioned Shanghai spirit. That's a phrase that President Xi mentioned a lot in his speech at the summit. So compared with other concepts that have guided international relations, what is the uniqueness of the Shanghai spirit?
Well, I think that President Xi laid out a very eloquent and broad vision during his speech there at the summit. One thing that I thought was fascinating was his quote of Mencius, and the ancient Chinese philosopher, and the idea that we have to aim high but look far. And he talked about areas of cooperation, aiming for a more just and equitable international order. He talked about international relations as a global village where we have each of us are stakeholders in that village, where diversities of civilization are not a weakness but a strength. And we have to bridge the gap of development, he said, which I think is an important message in a world where there's a lot of inequality. He also talked about rejecting the Cold War mentality, as he described it. Anybody that's familiar with what's going on in Washington, and we saw most recently at the G7 summit in Canada, recognize that there's a lot of tumult, a lot of confusion and tension in world politics. So it's probably a welcome message to the international community. Hear somebody talking about harmony and mutual interest in win-win scenarios, because what we've heard a lot of is divisive rhetoric, talking about unilateral outcomes or situations where there's protectionism or nationalism instead of a more global look towards world affairs and international relations.
I think the things you've mentioned are consistent with President Xi's concept of building a community with a shared future of mankind. So how would you comment on China's contributions in this aspect during the past 5 years?
Well, I think what we've seen from China over the last 5 years is a more engaging foreign policy, a more active outlook towards the world in sense of reaching out, taking a more leadership position on some key issues, where in the past perhaps China would have taken a more reserved and responsive approach. Now it's kind of laying out the platform, laying out a menu of options for countries to consider. So, for example, with the SCO, largely it was a security organization to begin with. But now we've seen this last summit that President Xi is talking about economic and trade as something in international finance as being part of the mandate of the SCO, and offering to put money and resources into fulfilling that mandate.
So moving back to the Shanghai spirit, what is your interpretation of this Shanghai spirit in the context of Eurasian and international situation?
Well, I think the Shanghai spirit represents, again, harking back to my earlier comments, the fact that countries as diverse and strategically positioned as we find in Eurasia can find common ground, can move and work together within an international organization. I think President Xi also talked about the fact that he envisions the SCO engaging with other international organizations more directly, whether it's the United Nations or some of these international financial organizations like the IMF or the World Bank.
So what kind of priority do you think the member states should focus on in order to make the summit better in the future?
Well, one of the challenges that I think it's incumbent for the organization members to consider is in the realm of trade. Because within Central Asia itself and within Eurasia itself, sometimes these trade angles are overlooked. And I think the Belt and Roads Initiative and other initiatives that China are taking can help create intra-regional trade or inter-regional trade, because so often you'll see countries such as Kyrgyzstan or Uzbekistan, they might not trade much with each other. They might trade via Moscow or via Beijing, but not necessarily with each other. So there's a real opportunity in the realm of trade for greater cooperation within the SCO member states.
Thank you so much for your insight. Thank you. And that is all for our special report today. Stay tuned on CNC World for more of the latest news here in the U.S. and around the globe. I'm Xie in Washington. Thank you for watching. Bye for now.